Thump, thump, thump. That was the sound of someone attempting to batter down my door at 6:30 on a Saturday morning. I lurched out of bed, clad only in my boxers, swung the door open, and was confronted by the ultimate Karen. She sported a synthetic blonde bob, a blazer that was a clear imitation, and an expression of fury so intense it could make milk curdle. "You have to move that boat this instant," she screeched, not even giving me a chance to offer a good morning. In her hands were a clipboard as thick as a customs declaration and a roll of garish orange violation stickers that I knew would blight my weekend. Little did I know, this was merely the first volley in a conflict that would culminate with her packing her life into a U-Haul as the entire neighborhood looked on and cheered. Allow me to provide some context. I am Nathan Cole, a 39-year-old graphic designer with a home-based office. I relocated to Sunset Harbor, Florida, roughly 18 months ago following my divorce, seeking tranquility and serenity by the water. My property included a small dock where I berthed my fishing boat. It's not a grand vessel, just a modest 14-foot boat onto which I had painted the name Lazy Sunday. Each morning, I would sit on that dock with my coffee, observing the sunrise over the lake. It was my version of paradise, or at least it was, until Hurricane Karen made her appearance at my doorstep. "Ma'am, I believe there's been a misunderstanding," I managed to say, endeavoring to be polite, even though I was barely awake and mostly unclothed. "That boat is mine, and it's on my dock. It's been situated there since the day I moved in." She gave me a look as if I just claimed the world was flat. "Your dock? Your dock?" She began to laugh, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. It was the kind of laughter that prompts you to slowly retreat. "This is community water, and that vessel is in breach of Section 12.3b of the Homeowners Association bylaws." With a sharp motion, she affixed a bright orange sticker squarely on my poor boat, as if she were executing a legal warrant. I stared at this woman, whom I would later learn was named Dana Ellison, and tried to make sense of what was happening. She was circling my boat, taking pictures from every conceivable angle as if she were documenting a crime scene, all while wielding a clipboard that had an official air but appeared to be homemade. "I'm sorry, who are you, precisely?" I inquired. "I am Dana Ellison, president of the Sunset Harbor Homeowners Association," she declared, puffing out her chest like a proud peacock, "and you are in grave violation of our community standards." The entire encounter felt completely surreal. There I was, standing in my underwear at sunrise, receiving a lecture from an individual who clearly had some unresolved authority issues. But Dana was only just beginning. She produced what seemed to be an official violation notice, which was printed on standard computer paper but embellished with enough fonts and borders to lend it an air of importance. "You have 24 hours to relocate this unauthorized watercraft, or you will be subject to a fine of $500 per day," she proclaimed, her tone suggesting she was delivering a judicial verdict. $500, I echoed, questioning whether I was still dreaming, and this was some bizarre stress-induced nightmare. "The regulations are perfectly clear," Dana went on, fiddling with her conspicuously fake jewelry. "No personal watercraft are permitted in community areas without the correct authorization. This dock might be attached to your property, but the water itself is a shared community space." She delivered this line with the unshakable confidence of someone who has never been mistaken about anything in their entire life. I observed her vehicle parked in my driveway, an old BMW that had certainly seen better times. "Look," I said, attempting to maintain a civil tone, "I think there has been a mix-up. When I purchased this property, the dock was included as part of the sale. I have all the relevant paperwork." Dana waved a hand dismissively. "Paperwork can be incorrect. I have resided in this community for 3 years, and I am more familiar with the rules than anyone. That boat must be moved. End of discussion." She snapped one final photograph for her records, then spun on her heel and strode back toward her car. 24 hours, she called over her shoulder. "And don't even consider ignoring this. I will be observing you." As I watched her drive off, I couldn't help but see that she was heading in the direction of the smallest house in the entire development. Something about the whole exchange felt strange. The way she had stressed her position as HOA president, the transparent desperation to seem authoritative. In my design career, I had managed difficult clients, but this was on another level entirely. I returned inside and brewed some coffee, mulling over what had just transpired. A part of me was tempted to just move the boat to sidestep any further conflict. Life is too short to engage in disputes with unreasonable neighbors, after all. But there was something about Dana's demeanor that grated on me. The smug self-assurance, the instant aggression, the way she had treated me as if I were a criminal for simply having a boat at my own dock. And that fine, $500 a day. It seemed far too steep for any rational HOA bylaw. I made the decision to call my ex-wife, Rachel. I know it might sound odd, but we had stayed on friendly terms after our divorce, and she happens to be a property lawyer. If anyone could clarify HOA regulations for me, it would be her. "Hey, Rachel," I said when she answered. "I could use some advice on property law. Can you walk me through how HOA rules work?" There was a brief silence. "Nathan, what is going on?" she asked, and I could detect the worry in her voice. I recounted my morning run-in with Dana, the violation notice, and the absurd threat of a fine. "Bring me your property deed and any HOA materials you received when you purchased the house," Rachel instructed after I had finished my tale. "I'll review them this afternoon." "But Nathan, something about this doesn't seem right. Most HOAs are not empowered to arbitrarily fine residents $500 daily, particularly for a boat on a private dock." As I ended the call, I had a strong feeling this was only the beginning. Something in Dana's conduct hinted that this wasn't truly about boat rules. It felt personal. The way she had surveyed my peaceful setting with a look that seemed to be a mixture of envy and resentment. I had assumed Rachel would simply clarify some tedious property regulations. I had no inkling that she was on the verge of revealing something that would alter everything. Rachel arrived that afternoon wearing her lawyer face, the intense expression she adopts just before she demolishes an opponent's argument in court. She laid out my property documents across the kitchen table and spent a solid 10 minutes scrutinizing everything. "Nathan," she said at last, "your dock is entirely lawful. You are the owner of that waterfront." She gestured to the property survey. "Do you see this boundary? Your property extends right to the water's edge. That dock has been in place since the house was constructed." "So Dana was incorrect?" I asked, although I suspected I already knew the answer. "Dana was completely incorrect," Rachel affirmed. "Furthermore, I can find no official record of her being elected as the HOA president. From what I can gather, she simply declared herself the president." This was becoming more intriguing by the minute. Rachel collected the documents and looked at me with a serious expression. "Nathan, I believe you are contending with someone on a significant power trip. Proceed with caution." The following morning, as I was savoring my coffee on the dock, I noticed an elderly woman approaching me. "You must be Nathan," she said, offering a warm smile. "I'm Evelyn Brooks. I reside in the blue house just down the road. I wanted to offer my apologies for what happened yesterday morning." I invited her to take a seat, curious about her meaning. "Apologize for what?" I inquired. Evelyn made herself comfortable in the adjacent chair and let out a sigh. "For Dana Ellison. She has been terrorizing this entire neighborhood for months." Evelyn proceeded to share stories that made my temper rise. Dana had reported families to code enforcement over their children's chalk drawings and had attempted to prohibit residents from engaging in normal activities within their own yards. "The woman is obsessed with having control," Evelyn clarified. "Ever since she went through her divorce, she's been venting her frustrations on anyone who appears to be happy. I suspect she chose you as a target because you seem so peaceful and content. That likely drives her mad." That evening, I discovered a notice fastened to my front door. "Emergency HOA meeting tonight at 7 p.m. Community Center. Urgent violations to be discussed." I could almost sense Dana's eager anticipation emanating from the paper. Well, if she desired a meeting, I was prepared to give her one. I collected all of my property documents and made my way to the community center. The spectacle that awaited me was like something from a comedy. Dana had arranged a projector for what looked to be a PowerPoint presentation and had taken a position at the head of the room as if she were presiding over a corporate board meeting. She was dressed in a different outfit this evening and held a wooden gavel that seemed to have been sourced from a craft store. Approximately 15 residents were in attendance, most of them looking puzzled as to why they had been summoned. Dana banged the gavel to call the meeting to order and dove into her presentation. "We are gathered here tonight to confront serious breaches of our community standards," she announced with great drama. "As your HOA president, it is my responsibility to safeguard property values and guarantee that everyone adheres to the rules." I observed several people exchanging looks. It seemed that others were also beginning to doubt her authority. She had actually created a slide featuring a photograph of my boat, complete with a red circle and an X drawn over it. When her presentation concluded, I rose to my feet. I would like to address these allegations, I stated calmly. I approached the front and laid my property deed on the table for everyone to see. This is my property survey, I explained to the attendees. As you can all observe, my property boundary reaches the water's edge. The dock in question is situated on my private land, not in any communal area. I watched as Dana's face went through several shades of color while people leaned in to inspect the documents. Moreover, I went on, I possess all the required permits for the dock. Dana scrutinized the documents, her face growing redder with each passing second. I could see her mind racing as she understood that her power play was unraveling. However, instead of conceding, she intensified her stance. Well, she said, her voice a pitch higher than before. Even if the dock is technically on your property, boats within the community still necessitate proper authorization. The atmosphere in the room was becoming tense. It was clear people were growing weary of Dana's theatrics. Emergency rule change, Dana declared abruptly. All boats in Sunset Harbor are now required to pay a monthly dock maintenance fee of $2,000. $2,000. Thistle and Sethade ensued was profound. 2,000, multiple people exclaimed in unison. Where does it state that you have the authority to impose such a fee? I asked, keeping my voice steady. I possess complete authority as the HOA president, Dana asserted. But her voice was beginning to tremble now. That's when Evelyn intervened. Since when? I don't recall casting a vote for you. Other residents began to murmur their agreement. What board? Questioned Mr. Patterson from down the street. Dana's meticulously built authority was disintegrating before our eyes. I was elected by the board, she maintained, but it was obvious to everyone that she was fabricating it. The meeting fell into disarray as residents began to challenge everything Dana had told them. People were taking out their phones to document her breakdown, and Dana seemed to grasp that she had pushed her luck too far. This meeting is adjourned, she announced, snatching her materials and hurrying towards the exit. As people began to leave, several neighbors approached me to express their gratitude for confronting Dana. Someone needed to challenge her, said Mrs. Chin. Evelyn patted my shoulder. You have courage, Nathan. Dana doesn't know how to handle people who stand up to her. As I walked back home, I felt a sense of accomplishment, yet also apprehension. Dana had been publicly embarrassed tonight, and I had a feeling she wouldn't accept it passively. That night, I began to investigate the community records. The information I uncovered sent a chill down my spine. The following morning, I did what any logical person would do after being pestered by a self-proclaimed HOA president. I delved into all available information regarding Sunset Harbor's actual governing body. What I unearthed was both captivating and infuriating. According to county records, Sunset Harbor had no official homeowners association. Dana Ellison had, in effect, declared herself the president of a non-existent entity. But that was not the most compelling discovery. As I examined property records more closely, I found that Dana was not even the owner of her house. She was a tenant in the smallest residence in the development. All at once, her frantic quest for control began to make sense. She was the community's least invested resident, attempting to fabricate authority where none was present. Equipped with this knowledge, I resolved to conduct some first-hand research. Over the subsequent days, I recorded Dana's own infractions against the very community standards she professed to uphold. She habitually parked in the fire lane, engaged in loud phone conversations in the early mornings, and had installed concrete borders in her garden without obtaining any permits. Evelyn dropped by on Thursday afternoon with some local news. You should be aware that Dana has been contacting everyone, trying to rally support for her campaign against you, she informed me. But it's not proving successful. Most people are growing tired of her behavior. Evelyn leaned in conspiratorially. Also, I may have let it slip to a few individuals that you possess actual legal documents, while she has none. That afternoon, I experienced the first signs of Dana's escalating tactics. She contacted the County Code Enforcement Office to report my illegal dock structure. The inspector reached out to me directly to arrange a visit. I'll be there tomorrow morning around 10, he stated. It's likely just a standard inspection, but I'm required to investigate all complaints. I thanked him and promptly called Rachel to inform her. Friday morning dawned with idyllic Florida weather. I was seated on my dock with my coffee when the code enforcement vehicle appeared. The inspector, a pleasant man named Mike Rodriguez, approached me with his clipboard and measuring tape. You must be Nathan, he said. I'm here regarding a complaint about your dock. I presented him with all my permits and documentation, which he examined thoroughly. Everything appears to be in order here, Mike concluded after about 15 minutes. The dock was constructed according to code, has the proper permits, and shows no violations. It was then that I spotted Dana hiding near her house, evidently anticipating some sort of dramatic showdown. Actually, Mike added, I did observe some unpermitted concrete work in that garden over there. Is that on your property? I followed his line of sight to Dana's garden borders. No, that's my neighbor's place, I answered. The events that followed were more entertaining than any comedy. Mike went over to inspect Dana's concrete work, just as she came out of her house looking agitated. Ma'am, I need to inquire about these concrete borders, Mike said in a professional tone. Do you have the necessary permits for this hardscaping? Dana's expression shifted from confident to bewildered to alarmed. Permits? Ma'am, this appears to be on your rental property, and county regulations mandate permits for permanent concrete structures, Mike clarified patiently. He began to write on his clipboard as Dana's voice grew higher and more frantic. But I'm the one who reported you. You're supposed to be citing him, she exclaimed, pointing at me as if I were some kind of criminal mastermind. I did my best to suppress a smile as I sipped my coffee from the dock, but it was a struggle. Mike completed his notes and handed Dana a citation. Ma'am, I am issuing a violation notice for unpermitted hardscaping. You are given 30 days to either secure the proper permits or dismantle the concrete work. The fine amounts to $850. Dana's face transitioned through several hues of red before landing on a shade of purple. This is absurd. I am the HOA president, she protested. Ma'am, that does not take precedence over county building codes, Mike responded with professional composure. He walked back to me and shook my hand. Your dock is perfectly legal, Mr. Cole. Have a good day. As his truck drove off, I could see neighbors peeking from their windows, some of them filming Dana's public breakdown. Dana marched over to my dock, seething. This is your doing, she shrieked. You've set them against me. I rose slowly, keeping my composure. Dana, I haven't set anyone against you. I merely presented the inspector with my legal documents when he requested them. If your concrete work lacks permits, that matter is between you and the county. You believe you're so clever, she hissed. But I have connections. I know people. This matter is not settled. She spun around and stomped back to her house, slamming the door with such force I was amazed the frame didn't splinter. Within an hour, my phone began to chime with texts from neighbors who had seen the incident. Evelyn sent a particularly amusing message. Just witnessed the greatest reality TV show ever. No subscription necessary. That evening, I decided it was time to fully grasp the situation I was in. I called Rachel and invited her to dinner. I think I need to comprehend exactly what I inherited when I purchased this place, I told her. Something about this entire scenario feels wrong. Dana is behaving like someone with a lot to lose, yet she's merely a renter. What piece of the puzzle am I missing? Rachel remained silent for a considerable time after I had recounted the week's happenings. Nathan, she said slowly, I believe it's time we had a frank discussion about your grandfather's estate. When I managed your inheritance documents, there were certain details I didn't consider significant at the time. She paused, and I could hear the sound of papers being shuffled in the background. Can you visit my office tomorrow? There are some documents that I think you ought to see. Rachel fell silent for a long moment. Then she uttered 5 words that altered everything. Nathan, we need to talk. Saturday morning found me seated in Rachel's law office, encircled by manila folders and legal papers that, it turned out, held revelations about my own life. Nathan, Rachel started, laying documents across her conference table. When your grandfather passed away and bequeathed you the house, you requested that I manage the straightforward matters, correct? Transfer the deed, handle the taxes, ensure everything was legally sound. I nodded, recalling how inundated I had been with sorrow and divorce proceedings simultaneously. Well, the house was straightforward, Rachel proceeded. However, your grandfather's estate was anything but. She produced what seemed to be an old survey map. Your grandfather acquired this whole region back when it was agricultural land in the 1980s. I gazed at the map, attempting to absorb what she was showing me. What do you mean, the entire area? Rachel indicated various sections of the survey. I'm referring to the entire lake and the land beneath most of these houses. That's not possible, I stated, even as the proof lay directly before me. Rachel presented another document, a deed that appeared official and formidable. Nathan, she said gently, you are the owner of Sunset Harbor Lake. The entire thing. 180 acres of water, In addition to the land under 18 of the 23 houses in your development. The words struck me with physical force. I was the owner of the lake, the very lake from which Dana had been threatening to banish me. But surely I would have known that. I asked, feeling foolish as the words escaped my lips. Rachel chuckled, but not in an unkind way. Nathan, you explicitly told me you didn't want to engage with the complicated aspects. You were navigating your divorce. You were in mourning, and you simply wanted the house transferred so you could move forward. I managed all the corporate entities distinctly. She illustrated how my grandfather had structured everything. He had bought the land at a low price, developed it gradually, selling houses while retaining ownership of the lake and essential infrastructure. The majority of residents pay annual fees for lake access and utilities, Rachel explained plainly. They don't own their parcels outright. They hold long-term leases with your family's companies. As this information settled in, I began to see Dana's actions in a completely new way. So, when she claimed the lake was community property, she was utterly mistaken, Rachel concluded. The lake is private property. Your private property. She holds no authority over it whatsoever. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the documents that had just inverted my reality. So, I'm not just a random man with a fishing boat, I mused aloud. I'm the man who owns the body of water she is attempting to prohibit me from using. The irony was almost too flawless. Dana had dedicated weeks to fabricating false authority over community property, while the genuine authority rested with the quiet man in flip-flops she had been harassing. Does this imply I can actually bar her from the lake? I inquired. From a technical standpoint, yes, Rachel answered, though I would suggest a more diplomatic approach. Driving home from Rachel's office, my thoughts were racing. Every time I had sat on my dock, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise, I had been enjoying my own private lake. Every time Dana had threatened to fine me for using community water, she had been menacing the actual owner. But my peaceful musings were cut short by turmoil in my neighborhood. As I turned into my driveway, I could see a small gathering near the community center. Dana's voice, high-pitched and distressed, carried across the water. I walked over to investigate and discovered her in the midst of what seemed to be a spontaneous rally. We must take firm action, Dana was proclaiming to the assembled residents. Nathan Cole has demonstrated a total lack of respect for our community standards, and we cannot allow that to continue. I observed from the periphery of the group as Dana worked herself into a state of agitation. He believes he can simply disregard our rules because he has a lawyer for a friend, she went on. Well, I have a message for him. This is our community, and we determine who is welcome here. Several residents appeared uneasy with her language, but a small number were nodding in agreement. It was evident that Dana had used the past few days to garner support from individuals who were unaware of the true situation. I call for an immediate vote, Dana declared. All in favor of permanently barring Nathan Cole from community lake access. Say aye. To my astonishment, 3 individuals actually responded with aye, though I noted they were all people who resided far from the lake and likely had no grasp of the real circumstances. All opposed, Dana asked swiftly, clearly aiming to expedite the process. Evelyn's voice came through distinctly. This is absurd. You can't just prohibit someone's access because you have a personal dislike for them. The motion is carried, Dana announced triumphantly, although the validity of her vote was highly debatable. Nathan Cole is hereby barred from all community amenities, effective immediately. If he breaches this ban, he will face charges of trespassing. She was practically beaming with self-satisfaction as she made this proclamation, entirely oblivious that she had just banned the actual property owner from his own lake. As the gathering broke up, Evelyn approached me. I apologize for that spectacle, she said. Dana only extended invitations to her supporters, and she rushed the vote before anyone could raise a proper objection. It's not valid, and everyone is aware of it. I thanked her for her support, but in truth, I wasn't angered. If anything, I was intrigued by the extent to which Dana was willing to push her delusion of authority. That night, I sat on my dock with the property documents Rachel had provided, gazing out over my lake beneath the stars. For the first time, I grasped what people meant when they spoke of generational wealth. My grandfather hadn't merely left me a house, he had passed down a legacy. And Dana Ellison had no concept of what she had just stumbled into. As I sat there, holding the deed to the entire lake, I understood that Dana had no idea who she had just barred from his own property. The next morning, I phoned Rachel to inform her of Dana's most recent power move. She barred you from the lake? Rachel said, and I could hear her suppressing laughter. Nathan, she just prohibited the legal owner of the lake from using his own property. Do you realize how legally preposterous that is? I told her I was beginning to grasp the situation. What is our next course of action? I inquired. We are going to allow her to dig her own hole a bit deeper, Rachel responded. Then, we will demonstrate to everyone precisely who owns what in this neighborhood. Dana moved swiftly to enforce her ban. By Monday morning, she had placed laminated signs around the lake that declared, "Public community water, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." The signs were obviously homemade but were affixed to metal stakes to mimic official notices. She had also engaged Tyler Patterson, a 19-year-old from the neighborhood, as lake security for a wage of $25 an hour. Tuesday morning presented the most bizarre confrontation to date. I was seated on my dock enjoying my coffee when Tyler approached me in a kayak, looking exceptionally ill at ease. Sir, he called out, "Mrs. Ellison says you are not permitted to be here." I could see Dana positioned on the shore with her phone, recording the entire exchange. "Hey, Tyler," I said composedly. "What's happening?" The young man looked mortified as he clarified that Dana had employed him as security. "She stated that you are forbidden from the water and that I must request your departure." What transpired next was the most ludicrous moment of the entire saga. As I began to gather my fishing equipment, Dana started to livestream the incident. "This is the consequence when individuals believe they are exempt from community standards," she declared to her small viewership. "Observe as we reinstate order in Sunset Harbor." She was practically vibrating with excitement, entirely unaware that she was documenting her own harassment of the property owner. Of course, I responded to Tyler, "Just adhering to community regulations." I began to load my boat while Dana provided her commentary from the shore. "Ensure you capture him departing," she shouted. Tyler paddled beside me as I headed towards the boat ramp. "Sorry, man," he murmured. "She's paying me, and I need money for gas, but this is genuinely strange." The entire neighborhood had gathered to witness Dana's performance. Residents stood along the shoreline with their phones out, some filming, others simply watching in bewilderment. As I secured my boat onto its trailer, Dana delivered what she evidently considered a victorious address. "Let this serve as a warning to all," she proclaimed, still recording. "No one is above our community standards. This is what genuine leadership entails." Over the next few days, Dana intensified her security measures to increasingly absurd heights. She set up a folding chair by the lake for surveillance and produced official-looking violation tickets using carbon paper. She even began levying guest fees on other residents when their relatives wished to visit the lake area. The tipping point arrived on Friday evening when Tyler came to my house looking distressed. "Mr. Cole," he said softly, "I wanted to let you know. Mrs. Ellison is planning something significant for this weekend. She's talking about setting an example, and I don't believe it will be pleasant." Saturday morning dawned with perfect weather, and I chose to take my boat out one final time before disclosing my ownership. As I was packing my fishing gear, I could see Dana establishing what looked like a command post on the shore. She now had Tyler and two other teenagers with her, all sporting matching t-shirts that read Lake Patrol. I launched my boat and made my way to my preferred fishing spot. The water was as smooth as glass, ideal for a tranquil morning. But within moments, Dana's security force was in motion. The three teenagers paddled out in kayaks while Dana directed them from the shore using a walkie-talkie system. "Sir, you must exit the water immediately," Tyler called out when they got to me. "You are in breach of community regulations, and Mrs. Ellison says she will contact the police if you do not comply." I glanced at the three teenagers, all of whom appeared deeply uneasy in their roles. "Just carrying out your duties, correct?" I said, and they all nodded with gratitude. As I returned home with my boat in tow, I could see neighbors conversing in small clusters, clearly discussing what they had just seen. Several people waved to me in a show of support, and Evelyn gave me a thumbs up from her garden. Dana had overextended herself so drastically that even her few remaining allies were beginning to doubt her tactics. That evening, I sent a text to Rachel. "Tomorrow is the day." Her reply was instantaneous. "I'll bring the popcorn. This should be entertaining." Dana had just publicly shamed the owner of everything she believed she governed. She was completely unaware of what was about to happen. Sunday evening arrived with a sunset so dramatic it seemed perfectly orchestrated for the events that were about to transpire. Dana had convened another emergency community meeting to solidify Nathan's ban and implement new security measures. I showed up at the community center with Rachel, both of us armed with folders filled with documents that were about to change everything. The room was at capacity. News of Dana's increasingly unpredictable behavior had circulated, and everyone was eager to see the outcome. Dana had surpassed herself with the dramatic staging. She had prepared a presentation and taken her place at the front of the room as if she were delivering a major corporate announcement. She was dressed in what looked to be her finest attire, accented with conspicuously fake jewelry that glittered with her every movement. Her self-assurance was unshakable. She genuinely thought she was moments away from cementing her authority permanently. "We are gathered here tonight to confront a grave threat to our community," Dana started, advancing to her first slide, which showed a photo of me fishing with a red circle and a slash through it. "Nathan Cole has demonstrated utter contempt for our established rules and democratic processes. Tonight, we will make his ban permanent and set forth clear penalties for anyone who believes they are above our community standards." She progressed through several slides that outlined her security enhancements and enforcement strategies, each more preposterous than the one before. She had even designed an organizational chart that placed her as the Community Standards Director, with various residents appointed to roles in her fictitious security detail. The entire presentation was so detached from reality that several people in the audience were exchanging worried looks. Before we proceed to a vote, Dana announced with dramatic flair, "I want everyone to grasp the gravity of this situation. If we permit individuals like Nathan to flout our rules, our property values will decline sharply. Our community will descend into chaos. We are obligated to make a stand." She was building towards what she clearly intended as a powerful conclusion when I rose to my feet. "Excuse me," I said calmly, "but before we vote on anything, there's something I should probably bring up." Dana's face instantly turned bright red. "You are forbidden from speaking here," she retorted. "Security, kindly remove this trespasser." She glanced around the room with an air of expectation, but her security force, composed of 3 teenagers, suddenly found their phones immensely fascinating. I walked to the front of the room and spread a large document on the table for everyone to see. "This is my property deed," I stated plainly. The room became utterly silent as people leaned in to get a better look at what I was showing them. "According to this legal document, I am the owner of Sunset Harbor Lake. The entire thing, 180 acres of water." The silence hung in the air for several moments before Dana regained her voice. "That's preposterous," she shrieked. "This is community property. You can't simply declare ownership of a lake." But even as the words left her mouth, I could see the seeds of doubt beginning to sprout in her expression. Rachel stepped forward and laid more documents on the table. "These are the property records, dating back to the 1980s, she explained in a professional tone. "Nathan's grandfather acquired the entire watershed and bequeathed it to Nathan in his will." "You're lying," Dana screamed, but her voice was becoming higher and more frantic. "Show me the proof." So I did. I laid out the original survey maps, the development blueprints, and finally, the deed that verified my ownership of not just the lake, but also the land beneath 18 of the 23 houses in Sunset Harbor. The room descended into pandemonium. Residents were pulling out their phones to record the scene. Others were insisting on examining the documents themselves, and a few were already making their way to the exits. "What does this mean for our homes?" someone shouted. "Are we all now considered trespassers?" came another voice. Dana was frantically sifting through the documents, her face going through various shades of red as the truth became undeniable. "Even if this is factual," Dana said, her voice trembling, "you can't just expel people. There are laws. You have duties." She was now clutching at straws, attempting to hold on to some shred of authority, even as her entire constructed reality was collapsing around her. "You concealed this information. This is fraudulent. You intentionally misled the community." "Actually," I answered calmly, "I was unaware that I owned the lake until this week. I inherited my grandfather's estate without a full grasp of its contents. But now that I am aware, I believe we need to set a few things straight." I surveyed the room, looking at faces that displayed a range of emotions from shock to amusement to worry. First, no one is being evicted. Most of you have legal lease agreements that I fully intend to respect. Second, I have no desire to be a despotic landlord. But I had more to say. I stepped outside and came back with a large sign I had commissioned that afternoon. "Private property, Sunset Harbor Lake. Owner, Nathan Cole, the professionally printed sign declared. I calmly erected it in the very spot where Dana had put her homemade community water signs. The symbolism was unmistakable, official authority supplanting fraudulent authority. However, I went on, looking straight at Dana, I do believe some adjustments are needed around here, beginning with truthful leadership. Dana's composure finally shattered completely. This is not fair, she wailed. I have dedicated so much effort to upholding standards. I have given up everything for this community. Several residents actually chuckled at this, considering she had been making their lives difficult for months. Dana, I said, not without a hint of kindness, you don't own a single thing here. You are a tenant in the smallest house in this development. You appointed yourself to a non-existent position and have been harassing people based on entirely fabricated authority. That practice must end. The reality of the situation seemed to strike her like a physical impact. She looked around the room, desperately searching for an ally, but all she saw were averted gazes and recording smartphones. I am giving everyone 48 hours to conduct a legitimate election for community leadership, I announced to the room, with all residents participating, not just a select group of supporters. I want a reasonable person in charge who genuinely reflects the community's best interests. I looked at Dana one last time. And I want someone who grasps the distinction between community service and personal power fantasies. Dana collected her belongings with trembling hands, her outfit suddenly appearing even more pitiful under the fluorescent lights of the community center. This isn't over, she uttered, but her voice lacked any real force. Everyone in the room knew that it was, in fact, very much over. As she made her way to the exit, Tyler Patterson actually initiated a slow clap, which several other residents joined. After Dana's departure, the meeting went on for another hour, with residents posing practical questions regarding property rights and community governance. The atmosphere was surprisingly upbeat. People seemed to feel a sense of relief at finally having some clarity and being liberated from Dana's capricious regulations. As I was gathering my documents, Evelyn came over to me with a smile. Nathan, she said, I believe you handled that with perfect balance. Firm, yet fair. She paused for a moment. Although, I have a feeling Dana is not finished yet. When a person's entire sense of self collapses like that, they rarely make a quiet exit. Monday morning cast an unusual calm over Sunset Harbor. Dana's security patrols had ceased. Her homemade signs had vanished. And for the first time in months, residents could enjoy the lake free from the threat of harassment. But I knew Dana well enough to think she wouldn't concede without a final struggle. As expected, around 10 a.m., I spotted her car leaving her driveway and heading towards town with a clear sense of purpose. Dana had made a beeline for a law office in a strip mall situated between a nail salon and a tax advisory service. The lawyer, Jerry Hoffman, listened with patience as Dana laid out her circumstances and showed him her collection of homemade HOA documents. After a 15-minute review, Jerry gave her the news she was dreading. Ma'am, this gentleman is the legal owner of the lake. The paperwork appears to be authentic and goes back 40 years. Your homeowners association seems to be an unofficial one. Dana argued with him desperately, claiming there must be a legal loophole, some way to contest my ownership. But Jerry clarified that being the president of a non-existent entity did not supersede property law, and challenging legitimate property deeds from 4 decades ago would be more costly than she could ever hope to afford. The consultation set her back $200, only to receive very unwelcome news. In the meantime, the community was organizing itself properly for the first time. Evelyn Brooks had taken the lead in arranging a legitimate election, and residents were enthusiastic about the prospect of fair representation. That evening, we conducted the first honest community meeting Sunset Harbor had experienced in years. 22 of the 23 residents were present. The only absentee was Dana, who was presumably too ashamed to confront her neighbors. The vote was quick and clear-cut. Dana was ousted from her self-proclaimed role by a vote of 21-1. Evelyn was elected as the interim community coordinator with overwhelming support. And we laid down simple, sensible guidelines for community governance. No more arbitrary fines, no more harassment, no more fake authority. Just neighbors collaborating to preserve a pleasant living environment. But Dana was not prepared to admit defeat. On Tuesday afternoon, she materialized at my front door, looking as though she hadn't had a proper night's sleep in days. Her usually immaculate appearance was messy, and her eyes darted around with desperation. "Nathan," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "we need to talk." I welcomed her inside, intrigued to see what her last move would be. She tried a series of tactics one after another. First came bargaining. "What if I assist you in managing the community? I could serve as your property manager. I'm familiar with everyone's affairs, their routines, their issues. You require someone like me." Then came pleading. "I have invested my all in this place. It's the only thing I have left after my divorce. Please don't force me to start from scratch." Finally, threats. "You can't just throw me out. I'll go to the media. I'll expose how you misled an entire community. I'll file a lawsuit for wrongful eviction." I heard her out through her entire emotional performance before I answered calmly. "Dana, you have 30 days to secure new living arrangements. I am not evicting you out of malice. I am terminating the lease of a tenant who has been harassing other residents and the landlord." The finality of my words seemed to register with her all at once. She broke into tears, but even in her weeping, there was a sense of entitlement. "This is not fair," she cried. "I was only trying to uphold standards." "No," I responded firmly. "You were trying to control people because it gave you a sense of importance. There is a distinction." She departed that afternoon looking more crushed than I had ever seen anyone. Staying true to my promise, I did not evict any other residents. Instead, I collaborated with Rachel to draft equitable lease agreements that offered people stability while upholding reasonable community standards. I did away with all of Dana's arbitrary regulations and set up straightforward guidelines centered on genuine quality of life matters. No more being bothered about flowers, children's art, or typical neighborhood goings-on. The change was astounding. Within a single month, Sunset Harbor had evolved into the kind of community where people genuinely wished to reside. Property values went up. A waiting list formed for people eager to move in, and the residents were truly happy to be living there. We started holding monthly community barbecues by the lake and set up a practical neighborhood watch system. The concluding chapter of Dana's Sunset Harbor saga took place on a Thursday morning in late August. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the dock when I heard the unmistakable sound of a moving truck. Glancing towards Dana's house, I saw her guiding movers as they packed her possessions into a weathered U-Haul. A few neighbors had come out to observe, though it was unclear if their presence was due to sympathy or a sense of vindication. As the truck departed, Dana cast one final look at the community she had worked so hard to dominate. Our gazes met across the water, and for a fleeting second, I didn't see the petty despot who had made everyone's life a misery, but rather a shattered woman who had lost everything she considered important. She remained there for a long while, likely coming to terms with the fact that all her manipulations and power struggles had culminated in this unavoidable outcome. Then, she entered her car and drove off, leaving Sunset Harbor in peace for the first time in months. Several neighbors had observed the entire event, and I saw a few people actually wave goodbye. It wasn't an act of cruelty, but perhaps a gesture of bringing a strange chapter of their community's life to a close. That evening, as I sat on my dock observing another magnificent sunset over my lake, I thought about the peculiar sequence of events that had led me to this point. 6 months prior, I was just a graphic designer who wanted to fish without being disturbed. Now, I was a property owner who had inadvertently become the guardian of a small community. The entire ordeal had taught me a valuable lesson about the distinction between genuine authority and fabricated power. Dana had spent months attempting to manufacture authority through threats and bogus credentials. But true authority stems from having actual responsibility and exercising it with wisdom. She had been so fixated on dominating others that she had overlooked the most fundamental principle of leadership. You must genuinely serve the people you are meant to lead. As the stars began to appear over Sunset Harbor Lake, I thought about my grandfather and the heritage he had left me. He had created something enduring, something that could offer homes and joy to families for many years to come. Dana had attempted to undermine that with her petty despotism, but ultimately, the truth had prevailed. Sometimes, the most effective form of retribution isn't to retaliate with greater force. It's simply to reveal to people who they chose to challenge. And sometimes, when you inherit something far greater than you anticipated, the best course of action is to use that influence to improve life for everyone around you. That is precisely what I intend to do.